We all wish we could talk to animals. As it turns out, we can. Animal Connections with Laura Rowley explores the nature of interspecies communication. What are our animals trying to tell us? Animals commune through love, a force that opens all doors. Listening to them teaches us how to be better humans. Why? We can trust them to tell us the deepest truth about who we are and how one can grow into a more powerful version of self. Laura shares over 20 years of stories and wisdom learned from her work as an animal communicator in this hard and thought-provoking show.
Welcome. I'm Laura Rowley. You can listen to Animal Connections with Laura Rowley on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Friday at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Listen online or on your mobile devices. To learn more or for a full schedule, go to dreamvision7radio.com. Dream Vision 7 Radio Network is the media partner for Omega Institute. I'm glad you joined me today. Today we're going to have an interesting conversation about happiness and how your animal can show you your best happiness. So that's kind of a big subject, happiness. It's sort of a nebulous idea, like what is happiness? And I guess that's a huge topic that extends beyond the boundaries of this show, because probably a few thousand years of philosophers and recently psychologists have tried to figure out, well, what is happiness? So we're not even going to try to go there too much today, but what we are going to try to do is think about the idea of happiness and how we quest for it. And I think the thing that's interesting is to ask yourself, is your happiness generated within yourself, or is your happiness something that happens to you? In other words, is it something we can create, or is it something that just falls in our lap? Or is it maybe a combination of the two? And there's a lot that can go into that idea, but mostly it has a lot to do with whether or not we feel in control of our lives. If we're in charge of our own happiness and we can create our own happiness, we have control somewhat of our lives. Doesn't mean everything will always be smooth sailing, but if we can turn lemons into lemonade, then we have a good shot at being happy and feeling balanced and peaceful. If, however, happiness is something that just happens to people who happen to be lucky, well, then we can be feeling a little out of control and feel a little perplexed about, well, why can't I be one of those happy people? So I fall into the first camp, which says that, okay, stuff doesn't always work out exactly how you want it to work out. Certainly there are challenges. I've had a lot of them myself. But all in all, we can do a lot to make ourselves happier. In fact, a lot of our happiness is in our control. So one thing that I've noticed in my work as an animal communicator is that people definitely link their animals to their happiness. People have animals or pets. I'm going to use the word pets throughout the show just because I think that's an easier concept. There are companions, there are family, there are loved ones, there are all those things, but pets is just a sort of simple word because a lot of the people I work with have horses, dogs, cats, gerbils, turtles, ponies, so llamas. So we'll just use the word pet because it keeps it simple. So pets, are they contributing to our happiness? Well, they must be, because in America, this is according to Google, we spend $73 million annually on our pets, just on their food, not on any health care, veterinary costs, or anything else, or boarding, or any of that stuff. In Canada, they spend $6 million, and in Western Europe, $43 million. That's just, again, on pet food. So there's an annual budget of like $40 billion. So it's an interesting look at, we put money where we value things. So everything, of course, isn't always about money, but if you value it, you spend money on it. I'm often talking to people who call me about animals in difficult health situations where they're forced to perhaps pay $4,000 for a veterinary surgery that's an emergency, or $2,000. And they say, well, I don't care what it costs. If you think it should be done because the animal wants it done and he thinks he can survive, then okay, I'll pay for it, even if it takes me a couple of years. So we don't usually jump in that wholeheartedly to spend money for most things in our life, but I see time and time again people who maybe don't even have the money at all to do it will say, it doesn't matter, I'll find the money. So we care about it. We universally seem to know that that is money well spent. So money once well spent, well, what is it? I mean, what's in it for us kind of thing? And it's love. It's empathy. And animals universally give us that back. They sympathize with us. They empathize with us. They look us in the face and they see there's somebody that they want to be with all the time. They always accept us. So that acceptance, that piece of looking at another being that says, I don't care who you are, you're my person. I don't care what you did, you're my person. That's worth a lot. I mean, we don't really live in a world where we get that back from most people. Even those of us that have had the most rosiest of upbringings and the best educations and have wonderful careers, how often can you go through a day and think, everywhere I went, they just totally accepted me? Probably most of us would say, well, it doesn't happen too often, or if it does, it's a blessing, or you hope you notice it and you're appreciative when it is. That's a bigger topic than for this conversation today. But the idea of being accepted is what animals give us. They just say, I'm with you. Where are we going? And they say yes. You want to go here? Yes. You want to get in the car? Sure. Do you want to go for a walk? Absolutely. And if they tell you they don't want to do it, then they're basically trying to give you some sort of message that something's out of balance or something's not quite right with them. Maybe they're uncomfortable. Maybe they're unhappy. Maybe they have suffered an injury that we don't know about. In other words, if your animal somehow thinks, I don't want to do that, usually you need to take notice and say, well, why? Which, of course, is what leads people to me. They call me with their troubles. They say, I have this great relationship with this animal. I normally totally understand my pet. And suddenly I just don't know why all of a sudden he doesn't want to go for a walk, or the horse doesn't want to jump the jump when he usually does that with extreme joy. The cat won't sit on my lap. So as an animal communicator, my job is to sort of tease that out and suss it out from the animal, what's disturbing you. And so we can use this interconnectedness that we have with animals. Most people that I speak to really know their pets super well, and so they're clearly alarmed when they call. They have their finger on the pulse of the animal, and they say something is amiss, and I need someone outside of myself to look at it with a little different perspective and perhaps give me a shoe-in to figuring this out, because I want my animal's life to be great. I want my animal's life to be perfect. So people call for just like the most noble reasons, which is really very beautiful for me to see. No matter how many calls I take or how many seminars I do, I'm always just so impressed with how, when it comes to our pets, people always try to be the best version of themselves. You might see your neighbors distressed and not necessarily know how to help them. But if you see your pet is distressed, well, people pull out all the stops to fix that. And my services is one potential thing that they use. So I have the privileged spot of helping people try to do a better job to be the best person they can be for their pet. And so I think sometimes that is maybe a definition of happiness. When we can be the best version of ourselves, we feel really happy. I know I do. When I feel like I did a good job, I paid attention to the right things today, I maybe made a difference to someone or for a cause today, that definitely makes us happy. And that is perhaps a definition of happiness in and of itself. If things don't feel like they're going your way, do something good for your pet or your neighbor, of course. But I think that if we foster that in ourselves, that feeling of goodness, we can end up fostering interconnectedness with our pet that starts to become more and more sensitive, more and more in tune, more and more like what I do, where you're psychically in tune to your pet. And that is the subject of a lot of the workshops that I do around the country. So, of course, life can be a trial, and that's a given. But we can still take charge, and we can still do some things that change sort of the rougher spots in life. And one thing that pets, for me, I always liken it to sort of, they're like a tool that lives in your house. And they magnify for you, if you pay attention to their behaviors, what's going well and what is perhaps going not so well. So, for instance, you come in the door and your pet normally greets you. Happy dog wagging his tail, purring cat, wrapping his legs around his body around your legs, parrot squawking, whatever they do. There's always this ritual when you come in. And if you notice the ritual changes, or you notice the way they want to eat or exercise or play changes, suddenly you start to realize, something's a little amiss here. So they magnify what might be amiss, not just in their own bodies, but also in your home. So that's an important thing, because our energy is in our homes. So sometimes our energy becomes out of balance because life is stressful, and we start to stress out the animals in our home because they're just as sensitive as we are. So they're like a magnet for our distress. They notice if we're upset, and they maybe lay a little low. If you're angry, they might skulk around and be a little cautious around you. In other words, it's almost like the air they breathe. The energy we give off, the emotions that we give off, is very much almost like the energy of taking in oxygen into your lungs. Like they really can feel it. They really sense it. And so when they start to act a little strange or a little goofy, a little off, perhaps it's a good indication for us. It's a mirror that perhaps we are starting to behave or act a little bit off the mark. Perhaps we're a little out of balance with our own sense of happiness. So we can look at them as a mirror and say, my dog is acting distressed today. I wonder if she's getting that from me. So this is a topic of a lot of the workshops I do, because it's almost like your pet has picked up the vibe of your home, and they are giving you clues to how comfortable your home is for them. And so it's always a good idea to pause and ask yourself, am I the one that's changed? Is my emotional or even my psychic energy a little scrambled lately, so that I'm having an effect on them? In the old days of the coal mines, they used to take a canary and put it in a cage, as cruel as this sounds, and they would put it in the mine shaft. And if the canary had a successful day and didn't perish, it meant that the air inside the coal mine was safe for the miners to descend into and go work for the day. If the canary did not have a successful day, he often grew ill, stopped eating, or perhaps died, and that meant that the air in the mine wasn't safe. So your pet is a little like that for you. They're like the canary in your own coal mine. They are feeling all of your psychic and emotional stresses and joys. So if they're not twirling around you and wagging their tail and acting chipper, that's a really good indication that maybe it's time for you to look at that almost like a tool that needs to be used, like to help you amplify your own happiness. So it's like having a really powerful tool at your house that if you don't do it that, then it's like having a hammer in the corner and you've got nails sticking out all over the place and you keep catching all your clothes on the nails. And there you got a hammer sitting right there. Instead of picking it up, fixing the nails, done. That's what your pet is like. When they're not in sync with you, that's because perhaps you're out of sync with yourself. And not maybe, you might also be out of sync with them, and they may not be feeling well, but there's almost always an emotional or